Hello, I'm Chris, and today on Cozy Fabrications, I'm going to be finally starting my Iron Man Mark III cosplay project. And today I'm going to be starting on the Iron Man helmet that is available on Thingiverse. So the best thing about this model is that it's freely available on Thingiverse and that it's already broken up in a way that we can print it on almost any size printer that has a medium size print bed. So this is going to be most of the people, hopefully, that already have 3D printers. In today's video, I'm actually going to be taking that model. I don't really like the way that it's already been laid out in the files. I'm going to show you how I pull apart that model, how we rescale the parts, and how we orient pieces for 3D printing. So I'm hoping this helps out a lot of people that have been looking for a project like this or something related and can get started on their own projects. So without further ado, this is Cozy Fabrications. So I know I'm not the first guy on YouTube to try to make a full suit of Iron Man armor. So in this video series, what I'm hoping to do is show you my process, show you what I might be trying to do differently, and give you step by step how to follow along, produce maybe not even necessarily an Iron Man project, but a cosplay project similar to this yourselves. So in this video, as I mentioned, I'm actually going to show you on the computer how I can separate models, how I can then orient models using open source software or free software in the very least. So that's about how far we'll get through in this video. Let's head over to the computer and get started. So as I mentioned, the first thing we're going to start with is the Iron Man helmet from Thingiverse. This is the original Iron Man Mark III life-size helmet by M.I. Presidente, and his work or his upload is based upon the RPF work of a Drum Guy 560. This work dates back all the way to 2013. The Thingiverse upload dates back to, I believe, 2015. Nope, excuse me, February 28, 2014. And so the first thing we're going to do, if we look at this one, some of the pieces are separated, but most of them are actually grouped together in the way that the original uploader thought that they should be. And one of the great things about this print is that the model has already been separated for us. So it'll work on small print beds. We're not having to cut this up. But unfortunately, due to the way that it was put together here, I don't think they're in always the ideal orientation. And because of that, if you have any failures or if anything's too close together or moves, you're going to lose the whole print bed. So I prefer to print these one at a time. So what I did is I downloaded this. You can download the whole package, and then what you'll need Autodesk Meshmixer. You can import these files in. So I downloaded them to Iron Man 3 life size files, and you can pull them in one at a time. So if we open helmet 1 in here, you'll see that this is this one. Alright, this one doesn't need separating, it's already one file. We're going to leave this one the way it is. So now we're going to replace it with helmet 2. So helmet 2, on the other hand, is actually two different models, and we need to separate these models so that we can print them separately. So inside of Meshmixer, we're going to go to Edit, and then we're going to do Separate Shells. Separate Shells then is going to take each of the different shells that it finds and turn them into different components, and then in this little object browser, we'll be able to see each of the components, and we can either group them together or we can get rid of them for exporting. So if we're going to export the front of this helmet first, we're going to keep that one, but we're not going to need this one, so I'm just going to make it invisible. We're going to grab the next one, which is this piece here. We don't need that one. And then let's keep going through the list. Which one is that? Oh, that's this piece here. Don't need that. That piece there. Okay, see this one here, this is the screw on that side, so we actually want to keep that. Now technically you could export this little screw separately to prevent any overhang issues here. I find that these level of overhangs usually don't present a problem, so I'm going to leave mine in. Like I said, you could pull that out and then flatten it down. Other one, that's that one there. And then I think most of the rest of these are all going to be part of the other shell. So now that we have these, we can see which ones go together. That's going to be this one and this one. And then holding down Control, I can group these together. I'm going to take these three. And then once I've got all three of them selected, I can then go and combine. So now these three pieces are in one piece, which is what we'd like. Okay. Once this is done, I can go to File. I can go to Export. I'm going to do 2-1.2 just to show you what it looks like. It goes computes it, and it goes to export it. So after we're done with the first one, we're going to go ahead and we'll make all the other ones visible. We'll make the first one invisible. And select all of these. Okay. And then we will use a Shift click to select all the rest of them. And then as long as we're in edit mode, you'll get combine here. Now they're all one piece. Alright, so now we're going to go to File. We're going to say Export. And we're going to save this to Helmet 2.2. One or more of these objects has exported. It's complex, non-manifold, resulting mesh may have errors. So we're going to let this go for this model because it is a complex model and it seems to work fine when I import this into Cura. Alright. After that one, we can go and import our next one. Same sort of deal though. We can replace it. We'll go to Helmet 3. Again, just as before, we want these separated out. Now these are technically the same part. So we're not only going to need one of those when we go to export. So we are going to first, just like last time, we're going to say Edit. We're then going to separate shells. Alright, found three shells. We have this one, and this one. We only need one of these. But first, let's go ahead and export this one. Make sure it's selected. Say File, Export, 3-1. Okay. And just as before, I need this one. So on this one, there's still some problems. I can see these little red dots here. There are problems. On this one, to fix it, I went into Make Solid. And this actually cleans this one up. We want actually sharp edges on this one, because I am doing an Iron Man. And then I can increase the accuracy. I increased it to about 300. Let's say Update. As you can see, that's cleaned up quite a bit from the original. Okay, let's say Accept. And then we can export that piece as a separate piece. (3.2.2). Okay, so with each of the other ones, I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm going to import each one of them. I'll bring in 4. 4 has a lot of pieces, so that's going to take a little bit more time. And then, but nothing fancy on that one. Same thing as we saw before. And then 5 is all one piece, so we don't need to do anything. So once we have all of our pieces exported, then we can open up Cura and start opening these up for orientation. So what I do, I open them up. Now this is the back corner of my Ender 5. I am actually going to want to print this sideways for cooling reasons as well as for the time lapses I do. So I'm going to turn it this way. And then I am going to, this is actually a decent orientation already. But if you'll notice, these pieces still are not flat here. So what I do is I go in and I lay flat. I have to reorient because sometimes the lay flat operation changes it. And if I go to prepare, notice here I have my generate supports on. I have touching build plate. Actually, I should probably turn that. Let's see. For this one, touching build plate's fine. There's nothing overhanging that's not on the build plate. Concentric I really like because what it does is it builds really solid posts here, anywhere that it has to build. And then we get bridging across it rather than a lot of lines that we have to move later. So notice this whole section here can be bridged rather than having to worry about removing the lines that may be part of your supports later. Alright, so I did this one. Notice now we start this one on the build plate. We have to scrape some of that off when we are going to level, but if you'll notice, this actually goes pretty well, and that's how we're going to orient that one. Now you can actually save your orientations just by doing an export. You're going to want the binary STL format. I'm going to create me a new folder called KF for Kersey Fabrications Remix. Under KF Remix, I'm going to call this KF Helmet 1 STL. Alright, so now that is saved, and I've got my orientation now in the future. Now if you wanted to take it a step further, you could even save your scaling at this point. Almost all helmets, for whatever reason, I end up having to scale up 10% for my head. It's pretty standard. I'm going to go and I'm going to do that. If you want more on scaling of helmets, check my link in the description, and I'll try to put it up here as a notification so that you can check out Nico's or possibly even Uncle Jesse's videos on scaling helmets correctly. This one's going to be a little bit harder because it's disassembled, but I'm going with the 10% upscale. I'm going to hit prepare. And again, I could save this for my own personal use as a 10% upscale so that it would be available for me later. Again, from this point I could send it to Octoprint, go ahead and start this print, but let's go through the other models, show you how I orient them. Pull that one out. I'm going to grab helmet 2.1 or 2-1. Let's take a look at this model. So for this model, again, what I'm seeing is I'm going to still want to print this vertically. I am going to, though, try to lay down these components so that it's flat. Again, due to print cooling, whatever side your cooler may be on. Luckily, some printers do have dual side cooling or all around cooling. My printer currently only has cooling on one side, so I'm going to put it there. I'm going to click prepare. And let's take a look and see what that looks like. So for this orientation, notice that it prints this flat now. You can see flat here, you can see flat here, which is what I was looking for. There's now some supports that are going to be printed here, but those should tear off pretty easily. And if you want to, you can even do something like the zigzag to make this a little bit easier to clean up. It's really, I mean, when it comes to supports, your personal preference is how does your filament take to being removed, so feel free to experiment with it. Again, the support part of this model, the slicing part, is not going to be part when I save my STL. So if I like this orientation, which I do, I'm going to save, I'm going to export that, helmet 2-1, and this will save my orientation. Again, at this point I could go in and scale it to 10% up, but I'm not going to do that. Next model. Helmet 2-2. So for this one, I don't like the way that these angles come off the bottom of this helmet. This is going to produce some really ugly support patterns on the bottom of here if we try to print in this orientation. Same thing, let's take a look. We don't want to print, the other place I would look at would be something like here. What we're doing is we're looking for flat surfaces that'll print without any issues. Pretty sure the problem with that one is going to be, let's take a look. You can always slice some of these. We're going to try to lay that flat. See what that looks like. Notice, you can tell by the color pattern here, that didn't lay flat either, which means that that's not going to print well. Other places I see flat are like here, so let's try that one. Again, a lot of this is trial and error. You're trying to just find the best way to print it, to keep all of the details in your print, and to use minimal supports. The details are more important than the end. If I had to use extra supports, but keep my details clean, I'm definitely going to choose that as the option. See, this one looks like it did pretty good. Notice down here there's no details. If I need to clean this up, I'm not going to be hurting anything. Also, notice there are no other red spots that I really have to support. Maybe in here and under here. But again, this is interior details. There's not going to be a problem there. So let's go ahead and prepare this one. I'm going to change this to concentric again. So here, this looks pretty good. This may be more supports than what some people want, but I'm actually like this because all of my supports now are on the inside of this model. There's really not that many. The concentric supports are clean here, here, and like I said, they're all on the inside except for these on the very front, which will be no problem cleaning up just here under the chin. So for my print, I'm going to go with this orientation. Again, if my fan is going to be on the right side, I'm going to reorient this print to print on the right side. I want all these overhangs, especially the more sharp overhangs, I'm going to want on the fan side because they're going to need the most cooling. Do an export again. Okay. And get rid of that one. Let's import the next one. And that's going to be helmet 3-1. So let's take a look at how this one looks in solid view. This is not the easiest piece to print due to the way that it comes oriented. So what I'm looking at on this one, if you'll notice, this is the outside of the helmet still. This, if we were to turn it over, is going to become overhangs. So we don't want to do that. We don't want to flip this. So this is going to be the only flat edge really available. We can see how flat we can get it just by doing that. Okay, let's take a look at the layer view. So as you can see for this one, so it's probably going to need some supports in the front. I could probably get rid of that if I wanted to by changing the overhang. But I'm going to leave it in for support as it's printing. Notice this prints really close to the build plate, which is really nice in the orientation I get. I'm going to actually have most of it touching or just almost touching. So that's what I'm looking for. And for this one, that should work really well. Now I could come in here and do everywhere on the support placement. And that takes care of a little bit of the overhangs here and here. Again, this isn't part of the STL that I'm saving off, so that's personal preference as to whether you want to just let this print. But I think it's going to need it. So, probably print that. As far as orientation towards the fan, this one's not going to matter a whole lot. If you wanted to, since this is the layered side, you can print it this way on your Ender 5 or any other print you got. So I'm going to export that, same direction. Let's grab the earpiece now, which we cleaned up in Meshmixer. And that's already laying flat, but let's see, is it laying flat? It is not completely laying flat. See there? Not laying flat. We want to make sure that we press the lay flat button even on things that look flat. Otherwise we're going to have support issues underneath the bottom. Alright, so now that should see, now that's flat. We're good there. And if we go to layer view, alright, looks good. And you can do this with a brim or without, depending on how your printer prints, depending on how your build plate sticks. That's up to you. So that looks pretty clean on a 0.2 layer height. Now one thing I noticed when I went to print this, let me show you this. All of my props I print on a 0.12 layer height, particularly if I want it to look nice when I'm done and to minimize the cleanup. I'd rather spend time on the build plate rather than sanding it. You notice there are a few imperfections here. All of these sort of things will get cleaned up ultimately when we go to fill it and putty it and stuff like that. I'm not too worried about little imperfections like that. I'm not going to remodel this piece is what I'm saying. So now that this is actually flat, we still want to export it the way it is so that the next person that gets it won't have to go through this. Okay. And here's 4.1, which I didn't actually show separating. And this one looks like it's oriented pretty well. It may actually already be flat. I'm going to make sure it is flat. Okay. Now we can orient it to wherever these overhangs. Overhangs are on this side, so we want that to be our cooling side. So we're going to put cooling in that direction. Do a prepare to make sure it looks right. This one should have almost no supports, I believe. There we go. There's some supports on the inside because we have some overhangs here. But that should be all. I don't know what we're seeing there. Let's see if we go down to slice it. No, that's just where it opens up. That's not going to be a problem because we're going to cut that open anyway for our helmet to move. So we're good there. Okay. Let's save that. Okay. Actually, let's make sure we always delete the previous one. And then we have 4.2. So for these pieces, on the other, on one of the other remixes that I saw, he laid these down to printing. I don't want to lay them down to print. I think all of these sort of things print better vertically. But what I am looking for is whatever the flat side is. And on this model, this is the flat side. It's the only flat side on this piece. So, but I do think it's going to be easier to clean up if we print it vertically. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to orient my model as close to that side as possible. Then I can let lay flat come in and do the rest. Notice there, this side's flat now. We're going to have some overhangs that have to be taken care of with supports. But this will be a good clean print in the vertical direction. It may take longer this way. It's well worth the time again. And again, make sure you're printing on layer height of 0.12 for less cleanup. If you have even more time you want to spend on it, you could do a 0.08, but I don't think that that's necessary. Again, this cleans up, takes care of all your supports, but these should be really easy to clean up when we get time for cleanup. Again, this is my overhang edge here because we have this. So let's flip this around to where it's oriented towards our printer. Then I'm going to turn it around this way and prepare that one more time just to double check it. Okay, so this one looks good to me. I'll do another export. Alright, one thing I know is that 4.3 for this helmet is almost identical to 4.2. So same deal as before. We're going to just turn that this way. Okay. Looks very similar to the last one in terms of the support structure, so that one should be oriented correctly. Do an export again. Okay. Come in here 4.4. So 4.4 is part of the dome of the head. We're going to make sure that the solid looks correct. Yep. You have two options on this one. You can either seam on this one, which is flat, or you can turn it the other way, which is flat. I've decided I'm going to leave it this way because if you were to turn it the other way, there's a chance for more supports. This is a more gradual curve, which is better. Just as I've always done, I'm going to make sure it's flat by hitting the lay flat button. If it's going to be flat, then no problems. And then we can reorient. I can turn off snap rotation if I need to get it a little bit more square. Turn that back on so I don't forget. Let's do a prepare to make sure it looks right. And I'm going to look at the layer view to see how that one turned out. And again, that one looks really good. No extra supports due to a soft curve. Okay, so now I'm going to load up my last model. It's Helmet 5. Okay, if you'll notice on this model, there are only a few flat edges that only appear flat. So first of all, these edges here and here are not actually flat because these are points here, which means that this is not a flat surface. The other ones would be here, against, as you can see from this angle, not a flat surface. It bows out in multiple places along this surface. And you can definitely tell that this surface is a curve. So there's really no flat edges on this component for us to use. So what we have to do is get creative. So you could try to get rid of basically your steeper angles. What I can do there, something along these lines. You can find an edge to print on. Something like this. And let's turn that back to where it was. Let's try to do this one. Now this is a more dangerous way to print, but if you get enough supports on it, it'll actually turn out really good because you have the minimal amount of cleanup to do on your fine surfaces, your visible surfaces. Okay, so on this one, as you can see, I've got a few supports here. Shouldn't be too big of a deal to clean up. I could still turn it a little bit more, possibly. Let's see what that does. Because I actually had some supports on the inside here that I needed to get rid of, if I could. So for this one, wow, I really got rid of too much. Now you could try to print something like this, but due to the extreme angle, it's most likely going to fail. You could also play with your support overhangs on here. So there we go. That's a much better print. You could definitely go with this one. Notice I've got a good curve here for a base. That's all going to support that. I've got some supports here and here as it goes up the model. So I think this is a pretty good angle to print this as, because as I go up, I'm going to get new supports along the way. Now these are on the nicer edge of the print, but I think with these soft edges here, it should do well. A couple of general printing advice. Again, as I mentioned, for props, for cosplay, I like to do at least a 0.12 layer height. I don't think you need to go finer. You can if you want to. Definitely wouldn't go more coarse, otherwise you're going to have more filling to do on your print. Wall thickness. Make sure you have at least a 1.2 or a 1.6 wall thickness, because what that's going to do is keep the infill from showing. Another trick on infill, I almost always use cubic on everything for strength purposes. If you have a really nice prop or cosplay that you want to completely get rid of the lines on, you can also try the concentric infill, which keeps any of the infill from touching the walls, but it can make the part very flexible, and I want this one strong. Infill density, it's cosplay, it's a prop, it typically doesn't need more than 20%. And print speed, keep it nice and slow. You don't need to print this fast. Again, any problems that you have in this print, you're going to end up having to clean up later. So, I go 60 or lower for any of the props or cosplay I do to minimize cleanup, at least on a standard printer. Some printers can print better fast. It's up to your machine. And again, on supports, I either like the concentric or the zigzag. And I'm going to print the ones today in a mix of those. And always print with the brim unless you know it's not going to curl up on you. Again, you need these parts to be flat. They need to stick to the bed. I always recommend printing with the brim. They come off really easily. So, let's go ahead and save this part as our last one. KF Helmet 5. There's our full model set that I'm going to actually save as a remix to Thingiverse for everyone to check out. It's one more remix. There are already several there. If you don't like my orientation, you can try out some of the other ones. This at least will separate them for you if you want to try out orienting them without having to do the separation of parts that I did. And again, check out the other ones that are there. Without further ado, let's get these parts printed. I'll show you a few of the time lapses. Let's go. So before you actually get to the printing, go through the process. Print some test prints. These little XYZ cubes are extremely important. And make sure that 20 millimeters, 40 millimeters,
which is how the size I typically print my models. 40 millimeter cubes are 40 millimeter cubes. And what you're doing there is to make sure that whether you orient the part to the left, to the right, facing up, that all sides of the model are going to be mechanically accurate and so that they all fit together properly. Again, these typically come as 20 millimeter cubes. I upsize them 200% because you'll find that the bigger it is, the more accurate you can dial in your printer, because those small changes, they actually affect large areas more significantly. And so by upsizing your print cubes to 40 millimeters, you'll actually get a better calibrated printer. Again, I'm not going to go over that in this video, so if you need help with that, I will link to some various articles that are available online, as well as some videos here on YouTube about calibrating your printer. So let's get to for coming along, following the process, and following me through step one of this much larger build. I will continue with the assembly of the Iron Man helmet next time, what we need to do before we start gluing it together, and how to make sure that once it's assembled, it'll be ready for finishing. So if you've enjoyed this video, please give it a like. Please subscribe to my channel if you want to see the rest of this project. And again, comment if you have any tips and tricks that other people can use for this part of the project. That would be great. I'd like to build a community here where people can share their ideas, can go along with projects with me. Thanks everyone for joining me. Again, this has been Kersey Fabrications.